Hi, everybody. This is Susan again. I'm here to talk to you this time about the Mars station in Cancer, and I'm particularly excited about this as a Cancer rising. It's already beyond my moon, so I've been saved from that much, but definitely have been feeling this. The actual station is on the 24th of February, and that's at 1:59 minutes and 49 seconds. So that's, let's call it 2 a.m. Universal Time. And so you can adjust backwards or forwards. So most of the planet will experience that on the 24th. And it doesn't really matter because it's so slow when it's changing degree. It's going to be pretty much imperceptible, although it's interesting anyway, just to note the time and the date of these changes because they might actually be affecting us in ways that are unexpected. This one in particular, because we've also got Mars in opposition at the time of the station, we've got Mars in an opposition of 3.5 degrees, no, 2.5 degrees from the moon in Capricorn, which is its ruler. So it's very interesting. This is what you call a mutual reception by exaltation. So Mars is an exalted ruler, the exalted ruler of Capricorn. And of course, the moon is the ruler of Cancer. So they're kind of working together, but both of them from a place of not really feeling exactly at ease or in their most natural habitat. So there may be at that time of the station a frustration or feeling of difficulty in expressing that, and it might be grinding away for a couple of days around that time. So for the few hours before, the few hours after, certainly, let's say the 23rd and the 24th will be days of relative intensity. For those of you who have these kinds of degree points, if we go backwards or forwards 2 to 3 degrees, so let's say anywhere from 14 or 15 Cancer to 19 or 20 degrees Cancer, and then by square the square to Aries, which Mars rules, is also going to be deeply affected, particularly so because Mars is your ruler if you're an Aries. Or Aries sun or moon or ascendant, that's still Mars ruling that placement in your chart. And then by opposition, of course, where the moon is in Capricorn, you're going to be feeling this both because of the moon reflecting that quality of the Mars, not directly reflecting, but in opposition, noticing, feeling that Mars, which is your exaltation ruler. And so you could say that that degree 14 particularly is going to be very strong for Capricorn, and again up to 19 or 20 degrees. And then of course Libra, this is a square to you as well. So let's give it, 2, 3 degrees on either side. And that means if you are, let's say, 14 degrees up until 19 or 20 degrees of Libra, you're going to be feeling this quite strongly. So Mars is it's beginning its building of a forward direction square, now forward moving square with Chiron, which will perfect in a couple of weeks afterwards. And that's already kind of holding, if you count 3 degrees of an orb, this is now a little bit more than 3 degrees of an orb. But that's a bit of a theme for these times, which is about trying to heal something about how we're feeling, how we're interacting emotionally, how we're doing around our life and our experience of family, nurturance, our emotional nature, which is everything that Cancer represents. That also applies to our notion of how we fit into the bigger context of family, the human family, or the sense of your nation, your nationhood. This is also a big thing that's quite aspected or highly featured at this time. So when Mars is stationing, there's going to be a moment of time where there's a feeling of something is a little bit stuck because we haven't changed really. We haven't changed gears fully until Mars starts to move away from that degree point. And it's going to be a while because Mars has been at this degree point already for quite some time, since early February. And also, it won't leave this 17 degree point until the 8th or 9th of March. So we've got like 3+ weeks to go before Mars actually crosses 1 degree and gets out of this zone where it has been. So if you look back over the last couple of weeks, depending on when you're seeing this, I'm doing this on the 20th of February. So depending on when you're seeing this, go back over a couple of weeks, say the beginning of February, and right into the second week, we could say, of March, and notice what's going on and what has been affecting you the most, and see if you can work through that. So one way that you can try and identify some of the things that might make you annoyed or angry or feeling frustrated an interesting way of looking at that was, what were you allowed to get angry about when you were a child? And how was that received in your family? And equally, who in your family was allowed to get angry? Were you allowed to express anger, or was that reserved to only a particular adult, or both adults, or a sibling, or nobody, any of the above? So notice that, because when you get angry, you're actually unconsciously expressing your values. And it's even more interesting because now we've got Venus in Aries. So at the time that Mars is stationing, Venus is slowly preparing her retrograde station, and that will be on the 1st of March. And I'll talk about that in another video. But that retrograde station of Venus is also not far from the degree she already is. It's less than a degree away. She's going to be at 10 degrees and 50 minutes of Aries, which is ruled by the Mars in Cancer. And so this Venus story, which is ruled by Mars, is also part of our values. And that's something that you can consider at this time, February, March, into April. Well, Mars and Venus are in this interesting dynamic between the Aries sign of Mars rulership, until the end of March at least, and Mars in the moon sign, and ruling that Venusian quality. So emotionality, our connections with people, our ways of expressing that, and what we value is very important. So when we get angry, it's unconsciously related to those feelings or those values or those things that we think are important to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't be angry about it. You could call them our attachments, but it could be just simply what we feel is our most important value. What do we fight for? And that's something to notice, as well, as Venus is part of this this transit or this discussion, let's say, while she's going through her retrograde cycle. And equally, if we go way back, if you're as old as I am, you will clearly remember the spring of 1993. And that was the last time that we had Mars in Cancer going through its retrograde cycle, and Venus in Aries going through her retrograde cycle. And those are really significant passages, because we're looking at, like, what is that, 32 years ago, where something important happened. And even globally, 1993 was the year that the negotiated peace accords were signed and agreed to, in regards to a two-state solution between Israel and Palestine, for example. And this might be something that we're going to be seeing again. I suppose that also Neptune and Saturn moving into Aries will have something to do with this as well. But again, as before, they didn't hold long, and they weren't actually really negotiated in good faith. So this is the challenge of having Mars in bad dignity ruling Venus that's not in good dignity, is that things can work out, but it may not last, or it's not exactly it's not what it says on the tin. And this is also what can be happening now. And I'm only giving that example because it's so huge in our psyche at the moment, this notion of issues of genocide and issues of just absolute breach of human dignity, and what is fair, what is just, what is right, and those Venusian qualities of harmony and justice are especially strong when she's in Aries. Finding that justice is like she's a warrior for justice. Don't forget, Venus was also a warrior, and in the Vedic lore, Venus is actually the teacher of the Asuras, which are considered to be the more difficult forces, where the Devas, who were the gods of the sort of more benefic forces, were guided by Jupiter. And in the lore, it's considered that Venus was the wiser one, the one who had more skill and more power, because it's much more difficult to tame the Asuras, the ones who are difficult, the ones who have evil tendencies. So this could be seen in the different aspects of our life, where we're trying to really grapple with our emotions and grapple with our values, and what do we stand for? Which hill are we willing to die on? What do we stress ourselves about, and what do we argue about? And it's really helpful to dig in and try and find why I do this. What was the original reason? Because often it's not usually the thing right in front of us. It's usually that triggers something that's latent in us. Not to say that we shouldn't be upset by certain things that are going on, but to the degree that we can or can't do anything about it is the degree to which we should try to manage how we're feeling about that. And because unless you can channel that Mars energy in Cancer, it just gets turned inward. It becomes inflammation. It becomes illness around digestive issues, for example. That's the whole system of absorption, malabsorption is governed between Cancer and Virgo, the way I see it, and we need that understanding of why we feel this metaphysical, metaphorical, or literal indigestion, and to understand that is helping us also make choices when Mars goes forward, because the energy of the momentum that's going to build through March, especially with the eclipses as well, is going to be really good for helping things take new shape, a new form, and ideally based on something that we have understood about what's got our goat, what's got us feeling frustrated, and each one will have our own unique take on that. But there's such a lot happening in this space between now as I speak to you and the month of April, May, of course, well into the spring, or into the early months of the middle of the year. But the moment right now is an opportunity to see where do we want to now channel our energy outwardly, because the Mars in Cancer has been much more internalized and difficult to grapple with. Or at the very least, it's felt perhaps a little messy, heavy, not so constructive. Again, with the Venus at the moment, really, really strong, because Venus is close to her station point. She's only a week away from stationing at less than a degree from this point. So Venus herself is very bright in the sky. We've seen her brightness. The peak was on the 14th of February. We're still getting a very bright Venus in the sky. We're getting a bright Jupiter also in the sky, and a really bright Saturn. It's a really interesting time to stargaze if you like doing that. I think we can see Mars as well, even though Mars is out of bounds, but it's still visible. It's still there in our sky, but I think super close to the horizon, so it makes it difficult to see unless you've got a really open sky, really clear horizon. So yeah, Mars is out of bounds. That's the other thing. So Mars being out of bounds means that it's gone beyond the sort of typical 23 plus degree ecliptic pattern of the sun. It means that the basic range of the sun has been exceeded, in this case, north of the path, and it can happen also south of the path as well. So that out of bounds is quite literally what it sounds like. Things are unpredictable. They don't behave in a way that is as predictable. And when a planet is out of bounds, then we can expect some more intensity. So we're getting this station at the point where Mars is out of bounds and causing quite a lot of pressure, a lot of intensity building up that might only be released slowly, or it might be released in the week following, particularly as Venus is so strong in her position, also ruled by Mars. So what else can we say about this? It's a really dynamic time, building to particularly the post eclipse cycle for me, which is the time where things really start to come together. April is quite extraordinary for that, actually. If we follow the whole Mars cycle through till the end of Cancer, when Mars leaves and goes back into Leo on the 18th of April, it's going to be a really interesting time I feel, to get a lot of stuff done, because you're going to have the sun in Pisces, trining Mars, and then also it's going to be squaring Mars from its place of exaltation. So the sun is exalted in Aries, and it's ruled by Mars. So that doesn't actually perfect. The square itself doesn't perfect until the sun is in Venus, and then Mars is in the very beginning of Leo. But nonetheless, the square is building, and those squares that are building in intensity are really powerful. Mars squaring an exalted sun that it's ruling is certainly impactful, and that we will feel quite intensely on. Did I put that date? I think it's the 31st of March. I think so. Let's have a look. Let me go forward in the days, and we see how this shapes up. perhaps I'll go week by week and we come back then to this moment. So there we are, finally Mars getting out, clearing the zone. Mars is in on the 14th of April. Let me back up a day or two. So Venus actually stations direct on the 13th, is it? 1, 2, 3, yeah, 13th of April. Venus is finally direct. Mars has a trine to the North Node, but just soon after, Mars is going to complete or perfect its trine to Mercury, and that's quite an interesting dynamic. And then as the sun, I notice on the same day that Venus is stationing direct, that's going to be interesting. April is going to be really, really extraordinary. We've got the Sun Chiron conjunction, also ruled by Mars, and then we've got this really lovely, and let's back up a little bit to the beginning of April. We've also got this kind of consistent, I'm going to give it a couple of degrees of orb. So we're going to we have to take everything that is good this year as much as we can with all of the challenging stuff. Okay. So I'm going to give it a nice orb of 2 to 3 degrees. And that means that basically when Neptune is preparing to move into Aries, which will now then be ruled by Mars from that point on, we're going to have a swapping of places between Neptune and Mercury by the 31st of March. And that means that there's this lovely pattern of trine that Mars has been holding with Saturn for much of February and into March. And it's going to be, let's call it the thing that sustains us, the thing that keeps us going, the thing that allows us to know that change is coming and that this is just the intense focus this year, maybe the few months going into the 2026 period or even later. This is the intense, crunchy time. This is what's going to sustain us through the chaos of March and into June until we finally get things a little more settled. Uranus is part of this dynamic trine that Saturn holds with Mars, and that's creating this mini grand trine, which is 2 sextiles and a trine. And so we have a Saturn trining Uranus, Mars building to a trine with Uranus. And this is also where the dynamism comes in there. There's the determination and the dynamism. So we're holding that with imperfections until we get to the end of March. So it's already happening in many ways. We're already feeling that from, let's say, the first eclipse of March, the 14th of March, which I'll do in a separate video. But just know that as this Mars picks up steam, there's a feeling of momentum that is really going to help us. And if you're going through difficult times, if you're going through a period of uncertainty or a feeling of I don't know which direction to go, this is very, very helpful. The square from Mars to Chiron holds, as I mentioned earlier, we get that through February, we get that through March, and it continues to hold until it starts to break in April, but it's still at this point, even at the end of March, it still holds. As we go forward in time, this movement of Venus backwards, now joined by Mercury again in Pisces backwards over to the North Node, is building up to the conjunction with Saturn. And all of that is building up to a very powerful trine with Mars. So let's just watch that as the first week of April unfolds. And we get that incredibly tight conjunction between all of these planets. Very, very rare. All of this stuff is very, very rare. And not only if we go back to 93, we get the Mars and Venus, but when I don't think we've ever had this Saturn, Venus, Mercury, and North Node as well. If we can we'll drag in the Neptune, and then on top of that in a beautiful trine, very perfected trine by now, and a sextile, trine to Mars, sextile Uranus. These are extraordinary times. So whatever you're grappling with, whatever you're doing, just have the faith that it needs to change. Just don't try to fix what's broke. And if it's not, like the saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Just leave it and see how things evolve. But at the same time, in your heart of hearts, many of you, when you come to see me, you already know what you need to do. You're just waiting for affirmation from the chart and from a sort of a neutral third party that you're on the right path. So you're the thing that your heart is already calling out to you is what you need to do. And this is a time where we require boldness. We require a sense of something bigger than us needs to guide us. So the energy here is about complete transformation and change. So by the time we get into April, this dynamic is really powerful. The sun has just had a sextile, lovely, helpful sextile to Jupiter. And Jupiter is also picking up speed as well. So between the 6th of April and the 9th of June, Jupiter is going to clear the second half of Gemini and move into Cancer. So whatever Mars is shaping up for you now, whatever feels frustrating and is really speaking to you in the house that Cancer rules in your chart, and where you find that Mars currently is where Jupiter is going to go in and say, look here, this is what we can do. This is where you can expand. And that is going to be unique to all of you, but it's definitely the same kind of sentiment. It's the same kind of possibility, we'll call it. Right, I don't want to go too far forward. I just wanted to show you that that is this movement of Mars going forward. We won't see Mars clearing the point at which it retrograded on the 6th of December 2024 until after, I think it's the first week of May, something like the 6th or 7th of May. So we still have some time here before we're really finishing that story that began even last November. Yeah, December for sure. And so that retrograde station, so the retrograde phase when Mars went through from the 6th of December, went into Leo up to 6 degrees, and then on the 6th of January, station back into Cancer, it will be wrapped up after, let's say, the second week of May, and then we go into really new territory. It starts to become a very different story from that point on. So we're still really working, bearing down on trying to understand our inner motivations and our emotions around that, and how we relate to all of that and how that translates into outer relationships. Very interesting days, very exciting times. Let me just check my notes for dates and things before I move on. Right, yeah, the 12th of March, if we back up, I'll go week by week so we can just back up more quickly. On the 12th of March, we have the Sun conjoining Saturn. And so, yeah, I'm not going to change the hours, just leave it at that. Sun is going to be conjoining Saturn on the 12th of March. If you're in North America, that might happen late on the 11th, but that'll be overnight for you then. And that also applies really for a couple of days, because if we give these things an orb of 2 degrees as they transit through, then you could really say from the 10th or 11th right through till the 13th or 14th of March, we've got a conjunction of the Sun and Saturn, which of course is annual. That happens every single year, but it's another thing that is calling in the Uranus position. This is, again, this Uranus at 23 degrees. It's now still at 23 degrees. Note that it stationed on the 30th of January at 23 degrees, and it's made it less than 1 degree in, what is that, 6-7 weeks. We're in times where the wheels are sort of slowly, what is that when people are like at a red light, or they used to do that and they were revving the engines and the wheels were spinning like this. It's this kind of time. With these sudden jolts at periods of time that we're going to be feeling. And yeah, that actual sextile is going to be on the day of the eclipse, on the 14th of March. So again, another day that I will look at in a separate video, because there's just too many things to talk about. But nonetheless, I think you've got the message. The 26th of March is the first exact square with Mars moving direct and Chiron also direct. Remembering that Mars rules that Chiron, that could be a really interesting dynamic as well. So there'll be a feeling of resolution around something that this Chiron has been representing for you in the house that Aries represents. And if you've been listening to my recent videos, you will have been hearing a lot about that. So let's see. I think that's everything I wanted to say to you. Yeah, the last time, I mean, aside from the 92, 93 period of time, so from September 92 till March, April 93, which was that March, April time in 93 was when we also had the Venus retrograde. We also had a Mars retrograde from September 2007 until April 2008. And we had another one. Oh, I didn't write that down. Shoot. Sorry. Go back 16 years before 1992. What was that? So 80, no, 76? I don't know. Anyway, how old are we? Depends on how old you are. We'll stop it at 92. And of course, then there's this one since September of 2024. And yeah, so this is something that if you're old enough, you can look back on those periods of time and see what was changing in your life in that Cancer area and see how that affected to you as well. So again, if you are old enough, if you are old like me, you will really benefit from checking out particularly your transits in the early part of 1993. But you can look at that from September 92 and see. Geopolitically, it's a very interesting time. And that's when I was working at NATO. So there's a lot of things that have been shifting since then that are really calling out in this moment. NATO has an Aries stellium in its natal chart. And I do believe that NATO is going to be crumbling. We see it before our eyes as the Trump administration has basically appears to have changed its policy with reference to NATO and Article 5 of NATO, which is actually about defense of each member state, which is why NATO enlargement is problematic. Imagine, for example, Article 5 means that if your neighbor down the street, who is a part of this treaty, is attacked, you have to go and defend your neighbor. And if you initially, when I was working at NATO, there were 16 countries as member states, and now there are 34 or something. So that Article 5 is meaningless anymore. So imagine your neighbor like 4 blocks away is attacked. Now you've got to go and defend that neighbor too. And everybody's got to pile in. So it's a guarantee, basically, of a world war. It's an unsustainable charter, and it's certainly an unsustainable relationship, because now we're seeing an enormous amount of difference, and that difference has been, and this is also very Mars in Cancer, that difference has been in the time that Mars has been in Cancer, it's been highlighted, these different ways of the countries really speaking loudly. They were saying the opposition to certain policies was absolutely spoken about over the last few years, and especially over the last, say, 3 years of the Ukraine war. But now, since Mars has been in Cancer, and especially since Mars was retrograding in Cancer, certain countries have been incredibly vocal about their discord around certain policies, one of them being Spain, for example, Hungary, Slovakia. That's another thing, as Czech Republic, and so Czechoslovakia, where I lived in 1990, had its divorce so it's sort of amicable divorce in 92, 93. So this Mars, if you're Czech or Slovak, this Mars retrograde with the Venus cycle of retrograde as well in Aries is going to tell you something about your country. It'd be interesting if you are Czech or Slovak or Czechoslovakian, if you're old enough to be Czechoslovakian, then do let me know what's going on, because I haven't been keeping up with that. But there's no doubt something extraordinary going on as well in your government, in your country, and potentially culturally as well as politically. Anyway, that's a little aside. So NATO is a mess. NATO will continue to be a mess. And I think this Mars cycle has really pointedly demonstrated that, okay? That Mars is going through the US 8th house. Mars natally in the US chart is in the 7th house of Gemini. And so there's something that the US is concocting. When Mars goes in the 8th house, that's a house of things there's crises, there's hidden motivations, there's secrets, there's all kinds of things. And that's where the US has quite a lot of energy. It's the Sun and Jupiter, and I can't remember what else. Was it Venus as well? Can't remember now off the top. Anyway, the point being that this is a time geopolitically as well that we are in for some surprising changes. But please bear with me as I keep reminding you that Neptune and in its trinus, but in its sextile rather with Pluto, really does represent the manipulation of information, manipulation of the appearance of things, the manipulation of confusion and chaos, the chaos agency, which is what seems to be governing most of our politics over the last century. And that Neptune is at the very last degree of Pisces, and building to that point at the 30th of March, where it's going to be shifting over into Aries. So this current situation, let me back away here. I'm going to go back to where I want to be, which is the 24th of February. This moment is building to that. And I just want you to keep all of these things in mind. You will need to change as a function of your environment, but your inner environment is the first thing to change. So I saw somewhere this notion that we need to, rather than changing the way we feel, we need to change our mind about what we feel and how we relate to that, and change how we feel about what we feel. So we're not looking to crush certain supposedly negative emotions, but we're looking to change our perspective on them. And that's a lovely way of kind of illustrating the moon's opposition to Mars in this mutual reception at the time of this station, which I find really, really helpful, really telling. And we've also got a trine. I'm just picking up on these things now. The trine to Mars from Mercury, that has already perfected, in fact, because it's the Mercury that would have been just earlier in the 23rd of February, but that trine is also full of beings. It's full of ideas. It's full of momentum. Full of a sense of needing to express or needing to understand better. That's a really good dynamic, the Mercury trining Mars. And it's supportive. Trine is always quite supportive and flowy because it's a Mercury that thinks out of the box. It's feeling its way to understanding things. It's trying to perceive new ways of understanding. And this Mercury is coming close to Saturn, where it's trying to focus and structure its understanding also, and give it some kind of a sense of weight, gravitas, or how would you describe that? Structure, maybe is the best way to say it, something that will actually concretize. So if you have plans, if you've got things that you'd like to see happen, just keep going through February and into March, and keep your head down, and you'll see that by April and certainly into May, things start to emerge in a way that you can really, really see the results of. Perhaps it's just too chaotic from now until the end of March. But just don't forget how that beginning energy of April is going to really be so deeply inspiring. So hold that thought. And even if Venus is still retrograde, even if Mercury is still retrograde, it's still very inspiring energy. It's still very helpful. Right, and this also begins a window of time, a very brief window of time of about 6 days. Is it 6 days even? Not even. No, it's like 5 days, 4.5 days, where we have all planets direct. So take it for what it means. It's just that you've got this very, very brief period of time where all the planets are seeming at least to move forward. But keeping in mind that Venus and Mars are actually pretty much stuck in their positions, where they're not going to move substantially, certainly not in 6 days. So I'm not even sure that it applies, to be honest, that the fact that all the planets are moving direct. Don't get too excited about that. Right, having said all of that stuff, I just want to now go sign by sign, and I want to just briefly show you where things might have been changing in your life and how that might pan out as Mars goes forward. So we're going to start with Aries, and we're going to move into right, there we go. So Aries, of course, Mars is your ruler, whether you're Aries, Sun, Moon, or Ascendant. And Mars is in the 4th house, where it can get a little touchy at home, or it can be the whole notion of home is a bit touchy. There may be some prickliness around the home. There may be some frustration, and that can apply most especially if you are dealing with your family of origin, or if you're dealing with emotions that are linked to your family of origin, we certainly have a tie-in for you with the 12th house of your ancestors. 12th house is the unconscious mind as well. We've got Mercury there and a trine to Mars. So there may be something that's coming through your psychological nature. Mars rules your 8th house of the inner psychology as well. Your the way you grapple with crises, the way you grapple with challenges, things suddenly happening. And that can also be what's going on. You might have found things going on in ways that were shocking or surprising, that you weren't sure how to deal with, or that you really internalized, or that you were already grappling with from another time. And now, as Mars moves forward, it feels like there's going to be a resolution around that. So Venus is in your first house, also ruled by that Mars, and that's a little bit nicer. It softens the edges around this, and it also helps you to feel just much more positive about yourself, maybe contributing more positively to relationships. Certainly, as Mars moved into your fourth house in its retrograde from the 6th of January, before Venus moved into your first house, you may have felt some kind of inner pressure or unconscious pressure, or it wouldn't have been so easy in the sense that when you have Venus in the first house, there is a personal sense of, let's say, being cooperative, being more harmonious, even if Venus is not in any particularly good dignity in a Mars ruled sign. She's actually in her detriment because she prefers to be in Libra, which is your 7th house of relationship. But at least you're trying, Aries. You're trying and you're doing your best. So the thing here now with Mars moving direct and Venus about to station, and both of them kind of really plodding along, appearing not to move in the sky, then you also might still feel a little bit of a feeling of stuckness and not really being entirely sure what to grapple with. Venus rules your house of money, the second house of the earned income, and your valuables and your values as well, and what sustains you, including family. And it, of course, rules your 7th house of relationships. And Mars doesn't only rule you, but it rules the 8th house also of your inner workings, and also the occult and all the mystery stuff of life, the wonderful ways of understanding life from a more mystical place. But all of these places are affected at this time, and it still might feel, certainly until the beginning of March, or even through eclipse season, it still might feel that things are not really moving in the way that you'd like them to. So don't despair, Aries. You can be a little bit impatient, but don't be too frustrated. This Mars in the fourth can have you feeling really aggravated psychologically or emotionally, and try to count to 10, and also go back, like what I was saying in the beginning, really try and understand, where is this anger coming from? There can be a dispute, or there can be something specific. You can say, well, that's what that is about, but actually your feelings around that are your own. So that's something you want to really take on board and understand. So again, questioning that sense of, was I ever allowed to be angry? Who was the one who was angry at home? And how was that expressed when somebody was angry? This can really help you. And also, that what are my values? This is certainly the story between Mars and Venus right now. And again, if you're old enough, go back to early 1993 and see what that was all about, and how that affected you. So I think that's it. I'm going to save the rest for the eclipse cycle, because otherwise we'll be here all day. But anyway, Aries, this is a good time for you. The next days and weeks after this station on the 24th of February will feel like a relief for you. They'll feel like you're finally able to accomplish more things. So just don't get frustrated by the chaos that's emerging now. Know that April, your month, basically, is going to improve things a lot. All right, so Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant sign. This is happening in your third house of your connections with your neighbors or your local space. This is how you communicate with people. It's how you connect with your extended family as well, siblings also. And it's certainly also very much about your willpower. And so you may have been frustrated in some way with the Mars retrograding in the third house by not being able to take action, or not being clear on which action to take. Mars doesn't do very well in Cancer. And when it's in the third house, if there's a frustration around things, it can just kind of turn around into a little bit of bitchiness, maybe some, sort of gossipy, sniping, just generally feeling irritable. And it would be a good idea to really question why that irritability is there and try and understand that based on, the overall sense of the Mars just simply reflecting something from deep inside. There may be something that's coming up with your neighbors, with your neighborhood, with travel issues, perhaps travel plans, including long distance travel, whether it be short local travel like the third house, or long distance, which is actually the 12th, and also the ninth, potentially travel for business, travel for higher purpose, like pilgrimage and knowing stuff, going to conferences and things like that. Maybe there's some frustration around that because of this period of retrogradation, but now things can start to unstick. But think first and foremost about your communication style and recognize that there can be, especially for Taurus, because Cancer is your third house, there's a lot of emotionality around your communication style. And you can feel sometimes you can express yourself in a way that may be difficult for other people to understand because it's coming from a more emotional place, less of a rational place. With Mars, they're now going direct. It'll be perhaps easier to be more clear what you need to say, but I'd say give it a good bit of thought, emotionally understand, let's say, what's behind the expression, so you can be clear and stating from a place of your needs rather than from this place of emotional upset. What else do you need? Oh yeah, Venus, your ruler. Venus is in the 12th house now. She's much happier with you, and she's much happier in your 6th house of work, your everyday life and your habits and so on. So she struggles a bit in the 12th house for Taurus. She's ruled by that Mars, which has also been struggling in your 3rd house. And so there could be quite a lot of deep emotional churning that's going on for Taurus. And that has to do with deep reflections or awareness around what you might describe as your unconscious motivations or patterns of relating in a way that's difficult to be open about in some way, shape, or form. This might have something to do with finances, potentially, something to do with money or concerns around that. Mars is the 3rd house, represents financial exchanges of all kinds or business enterprises, this kind of thing. That might be part of your story if you are somebody who works for yourself or has a business. Venus in the 12th house in not so strong dignity can represent losses, and Chiron has been there too for a while, where you may have had to be grappling with issues around that, but it's not for all Taurians. But certainly the Venus in the 12th is giving you a lot of food for thought around how you conduct relationships. Are you open? Again, with that 3rd house ruled by the moon, your communication may be a little bit nebulous. You're not really able to speak clearly. And with Venus in the 12th house, you might want to question your tactics, how you deal with relationships, and how you your hidden motivations, both internally but also within the context of the relationship. What else is that for Venus? I think that's it, Taurus. I think that's all I need to say now. When we get towards the end of March, there's a lot more to say for you, as Uranus is picking up more strongly, or let's say from the middle of Mars, Uranus is picking up more strongly on these sextiles to both Mars and Saturn and everything else that's in Pisces. So that becomes a very dynamic time for you, and you're really going to be motivated by that. There's going to be something that you can really bite your teeth into. And so this period of, if there is any frustration or period of adjustment that requires some kind of reflection on relationship, is going to be helpful when that time comes later in March. Good luck, Taurus. See you in the next video. And Gemini, this is happening in your 2nd house of money, and it represents everything that you possess. It's all the stuff of your life. It's the things that you own and what you value, the things that you care for. It also represents family and your connection to family and what supports you through family and other dynamics, including food, and especially Cancer on the 2nd house. Food is all about supporting, nourishing, and caring for you. So with Mars going through the second, you may have had to grapple with some of these different dynamics, whether it be within the family or within your own experience of needing support, hoping for support, maybe not finding it. That's the thing. You may have felt that your friends had let you down, or that you didn't really previously invest in your friendships. And now with Venus in the house of friends, ruled by that Mars, she's going to show you which friends are still there, which ones are no longer there, and what needs to change around that. Perhaps based on your values, or perhaps based on your sense of who should have been there when you needed them and who wasn't, or who you're ready to recognize needs your help more. So you need to be the one to help, and you'll perhaps think about how to reach out in that sense. So the house of gains is also what the 11th house stands for, and that also is really nice. When Venus goes in there, it offers up an opportunity to increase revenue, especially if it's coming from the thing that you do. It can also be just random things, support from people. Again, with the retrogradation, you might be recognizing where support has been lacking or it's not been there, but you also might recognize where there has been support and it's been extremely valuable. So you can reflect back on the dates that I gave in the introduction to see if this kind of thing has happened already before. But it could very well be about also recalibrating what you think is important around money, values, the value of things as well, the value of money for you, and your own personal value. Your ruler, Mercury, is in a trine from the 10th house of your career to this Mars, and Mercury is about to meet up with Saturn. So something is going to be serious, something is going to be established in a way that's quite important. Mercury will meet up with Saturn again in March when it is retrograding, or actually it's early April, when it's retrograding back into a conjunction and then going forward again. And I'm not sure if that conjunction perfects, actually. We'll do that in another video. I'll have a look at that, but it'll get very, very close, but I'm not sure it actually perfects. I think Mercury just breezes into about a degree of orb, but still we'll call it a conjunction for the practicality of it, which means that you're really trying to establish something very new in your career. And this trine to Mars in your second house, which is ruled by that, which is ruling that Venus in the 11th house, which is a very important signature for gains and income that you might earn, could show you that you need to get serious about something. Certainly, this is a big theme for Gemini all through this year and into the first half of 2026, while the North Node is still up there in your 10th house. So a really big time for understanding your values. Just as I said in the introduction, try and understand your motivations behind all of that and what you learned from this Mars retrograde phase from, from the 6th of December all the way back through till now on the 24th of February. So Gemini, I think that's it. We're going to leave the rest for another video so we don't stay here for too long, and I'll see you in the next one. So Cancer, my fellow crabs, this is in the first house for you. Obviously, Mars has been in the sign of Cancer since last September 2024, and then it left on the 4th of November to move into the second house where Leo is on the 4th of November, and then it retrograded on the 6th of December, and it came back into Cancer as a retrograde from the 6th of January. So it's been a moment with this Mars. It'll be another moment because it's only going to leave Cancer on the 18th of April. You'll hear more in the introduction if you haven't already. And so that's been an intense time. As I said in the introduction, I have felt a little bit like a slug. I found it really difficult to accomplish things. I found that my energy was extremely variable, and I also have the moon in the first house, so that's true for me anyway. But anyway, I found with Mars there, sometimes really hard to find the momentum or get up and go to do stuff. And I definitely felt that at times there was a little bit of a nihilistic feeling of what's the point? What's the point of any of it? And especially with reference to certain ways that I work, but also because with that 9th house stuff going on, Jupiter in the 12th that we've all got, and the Neptune on the North Node in the 9th having been so strongly impacted, I've been having just these most incredible moments of waking up that it's not entirely new to me, but it's just bigger and more clarity, more sort of psychic energy that I have been picking up on. So you let me know if you're a Cancer, a sun, ascendant sun or moon sign, how that might be impacting you too. I'd be curious to know because this is really hitting our chart in all these extraordinary places. Anyway, so with the Mars there in the first house, now going forward, there's going to be a lot more momentum around career, around social status as well. When I have these placements of Venus in the 10th house going retrograde, and most especially when I had that in 93 as well, it profoundly changed my career or my notion of where I wanted to work. I became clear where I did not want to work. I was in NATO at that time, but it took me a year to get out of that. Was it a year and a half from that point to get out of that? It just became crystal clear. That was clear. And I knew what I didn't want. That was already that. And then the other aspect is that whenever Venus is retrograding in Aries, it affects my fourth house, the place that I live, because Venus does rule that. And of course, she also rules our house of friendships and gains. And so this dynamic is emphasized now because Mars from the first house is ruling Venus in the 10th house. And that dynamic between the two of them stays really strong until the 18th of April when Mars finally leaves and goes into the second house where finances and money might start to become more significant. But Venus will be in the 9th house at that point, and on the 13th is stationing direct. So she doesn't get back into Aries until the end of April, when Mars is in Leo. So there's a big story here which can pull in our sense of ambition and what we want to achieve at work, where we want to live, who do we want to live with, how, in what way, and how do we feel about our own contribution to our career. One of the other things that really struck me in this retrograde time, and I'm saying this only because I think I hope that it's helpful. It's not to talk about myself, but my way of working had to be completely restructured because I was once again finding myself overgiving, doing way too much, and feeling it difficult to catch up. And so this is perhaps also the quality of that Mars retrograding in the first, where it just felt like I couldn't get fully organized, and that's well, perhaps also the Piscean side that is anyway my tendency, though not all of you have anything in Pisces, but just to say that was my experience. I found now I'm hoping that my reorganization, which I had in Mars retrograde, including of my physical day-to-day practices, for example, my regular working out and my better attention to my physicality, literally getting stronger, getting my body stronger. Those things helped me a lot because now I feel more capable. And as Mars then stations and moves direct, I'm really hoping that that will translate into further participation in my career and moving in that direction that I've set myself up to be more organized and more focused. Now, obviously, Mars also rules the fifth house for Cancer, which represents children. It represents, love affairs, romance. Can be the joyful expression of your life, your creative force, your profession if you're self-employed, as I am, and so that also applies to me again through the fifth house. That Mars shifting direction now will also contribute to that, and in the sense that maybe your children had been not clear of a direction or not clear for themselves what they wanted, or they needed your attention or guidance or something. This might have been also something that came through in the last couple of months, or 3 months even, but certainly since January. And I think that's all I need to say here. We've got that trine. I won't go too far deeper into that. I'll talk about the rest of it in other videos, and do listen to the introduction otherwise, because that really applies to Cancer for sure. But the trine that's from Mercury to Mars is also extremely supportive. You're bringing in a sense of your higher purpose and what you want to do, which is really unavoidable at this time, Cancer. This is the time in your life, February, March, April, May, when most of your attention is going to be on this ninth house, and where all of that energy is about what am I here for? What do I need to do? How do I need to manifest that? And with Mercury in a trine to Mars, there's a way of taking that knowledge and awareness, expressing it perhaps in a way that feels more dynamic and maybe even more personal. Kind of just like what I did, sharing with you my experience of this moment in time. I'm just saying. So there, we'll leave it at that, Cancer. Your all systems go from this point. Much more dynamic energy for the career. The only thing now to do is to focus on that Venus retrograding. I'll do a separate video about that to really get clear again how that's affecting everybody. But certainly, with or without the Venus going direct, it's really all about the career. It's all about social status and how to move forward from there, as Mars is changing your degree of activity and dynamism around all of your life. All right, good luck, Cancer. I'll see you in the next video. Leo, this is happening in your 12th house, and so there may have been a certain amount of agitation or frustration that may have been repressed or not clear in terms of your unconscious. There may have been something that was kind of percolating or churning away for quite some time that had you feeling anxious or agitated in a way that wasn't easy to express. The sun for Leo is in the 8th house. That's not usually a comfortable place, especially for your ruler. And the sun is every year here in the 8th house whenever it goes into Pisces, and there's it's not really seeing you. It's not really able to highlight you. And that's why why Pisces and Leo don't really vibe terribly well. Not that people can't get along, but that the energy of those two signs is not really in order. And so there could be quite a lot going on behind the scenes, behind the eyes, as it were, in your unconscious process, because you've got quite a lot of activity now in your 8th house, and you've got that Mars going through the 12th house. This can also represent things that you're understanding. And now with Mars going direct, you're willing to take action on it, and you're really ready to acknowledge. This could be even with reference to how family patterns of trauma or issues that you need to deal with in marriage, for example, or any kind of shared resources or things that are maybe a little bit more taboo. You're now understanding better how to deal with that and know what to actually do to take action. Now, Mars for you rules the 9th house of your sense of purpose and your higher purpose and your beliefs and what you have faith in, as well as your 4th house of your psychology and your home and your place of security, where you feel good, where you feel safe. And so there's a lot here that has to do with this new sense of direction, perhaps based on a sense of more faith, more purpose, more understanding of what you might call less superficial aspects of life, the more intense aspects of life. Certainly with Mars ruling your 4th house, and that it will depend on your natal chart, the Mars from the 12th to the 4th is asking you to take action on things that may be more involved with spirit or your sense of your connection to your family, your connection to your legacy or your lineage, your ancestors, including your spiritual ancestors. So there's something here that allows you to now see it and take action on it. And when Mars comes back into your 1st house, which is part of this bigger cycle, so you kind of get dragged back and forth between yourself and what's behind your eyes, what's behind the veil, as it were, that's going to really be a kind of a refreshing burst of energy, because it'll trine that 9th house that Mars rules, and that just gives you all kinds of get up and go. And so you're looking deeper into things at this point where you can then bring them out. The Venus retrograde is contributing to that as well. And of course, retrograding in your place of higher wisdom, higher learning, what you have faith in, what you believe in, a road to God, it's often called. Venus likes being up there because it's all about learning. So Mars is suggesting that maybe there's some learning to be done that is spiritual or at a distance in some way from other cultures, other people, from far away. And also because your ruler is there in the 8th house, you may be really opening yourself up in a very important way at this time to occult studies or psychological studies, trauma studies, working on all those different aspects of the human psyche. So really important potential there. We've got Mercury there also from the 8th house trining Mars in the 12th. So there is something that you can really become aware of much more fully. And speak about it as well. All right. I think, yeah, I'm going to leave it there and we'll leave the rest for the next video because there's quite a lot to cover here. We'll come to Venus in another video. Good luck with that, Leo. See you in the next video. So Virgo, I got to say this, it is all about relationships, but for just this one moment, I can actually talk about something else. And I know some of you hate hearing this thing about relationships, but the fact is, it is all about relationships for you at this moment. There is no escaping that. And that's where the nodal axis is until July 2026. So if you don't want to hear any more about this, then you might want to watch something else. But nonetheless, we're looking at different relationships at this point because Mars is in your house of friendship. Sorry. And it's also the house of gains. It's the house of your future, your vision for the future. What do you feel about that? And certainly with Mars having gone retrograde there, in that house, there may have been a lot of reflection around all of those questions. What do I want? What's my drive? What's taking me forward? How do I want to play a role in my community of friends, in my network of associates, or my network of friends, or in my group that shares this idea with me, or that shares this belief with me, and so on. The 11th house is the house of also what we get to be recognized for, how we are recognized for things. And there may be something that now you're feeling recognized for. You've said something, you communicated something, you've written something, you put that video out there, and now you're going to feel that there's something that is paying back. You're getting this kind of payback because Mars rules your third house. And you're going to be seen more about whatever it is that you're putting out there. It rules the house of gains as well, but generally speaking, Mars in the house of gains means you're the one that has to hustle for that, or that the gains are coming through some kind of competitive situation, or perhaps also from an elder brother, if you're lucky enough to have an elder brother that throws good things your way. Also, Mars rules your 8th house, and that's where we find Venus. And Venus is asking for more awareness of intimacy, more awareness of whether that be your emotional or sexual or psychological intimacy, more awareness of how things have been impacting you in relational sharing. That can be about shared values, shared actual resources, who does the dishes. All of those dynamics are really important. And again, I'm going to have to say it's about the relationship, but there we are. And so it's a time where you're also reflecting on these maybe bigger questions of life, sort of like the philosophical questions of why are we here, and why do I get curious about these things? When Venus is in the 8th, there can be receiving a lot of information or support from other people, even in the guise of counselors or teacher, people who support your learning, people who support your advancement, people who support you as a person. And of course, your ruler, Mercury, is across the way, across the dinner table in your 7th house, again, of relationship. And Mercury is not super happy in Pisces. It's considered to be both in detriment and fall because you get to have Mercury in its home sign as well as in its place of exaltation. So you can't have it all. You're going to have to wait until Mercury comes back around to you. But in the meantime, it gives you a lot of dialogue or potential for opening up discussion, talking about partnership, talking about things that might affect your work as well, because Mercury also rules your 10th house of your status and your work, your career. And Mercury in the 8th is actually quite helpful because it's a constructive way of experiencing connection, again, with relationship. And it's in a trine to Mars in the 11th house. And that's really good because it can actually pull in some ideas about the future that might be based on partnership. And Mercury is going to have a longer journey through your 7th and 8th houses because, like Venus, it's going to be retrograding from Aries, roughly the same point, all the way back into Pisces and then back through. So we're really, this is the theme. Again, as I said, if you don't want to hear anything more about relationships and about that dynamic, the victim martyr thing that nobody wants to hear about, you're going to have to watch something else because that's going to be something I'm going to continue to talk about. And so here we have a lovely trine that Mercury is supporting Mars. So think in terms of a big picture, think about the future. What has that Mars told you about the frustrations or the things that are restricting you in your circle of friends or in your vision for the future, or in how you get things from other people or gain money from the thing that you do? Notice if there's something that's counterproductive or not helping in one way or another. And this can set you on the new path as Mars starts to move direct. Even if Venus is moving retrograde, you'll still get the benefit out of it. Right. And we'll certainly come back and talk about both Venus and your ruler Mercury retrograding in the month ahead. All right. So good luck with all of that, Virgo, and I'll see you in the next video. And Libra, we have Mars at the top of your chart. So there's a lot of focus for you with Cancer in your 10th house, a lot of focus on your status, whether that be your reputation or your career status or your social status, married, not married. Certainly with your ruler Venus in the 7th house, the relationship issue is really the hot button issue for you. That might be professional relationships, especially because there's so much activity going on in the 6th. But the 6th house is also issues with people who are working against you that require some kind of adjustment on your part or extra effort. It's the house of obstacles and needing to overcome and having to go beyond things that are not so easy. So there's definitely a strong dynamic for you in these months overall between your relational qualities, even the literal dynamic of who is in relationship with me, and your work and your everyday obligations. So Venus also rules your 8th house of marriage. So this story continues for Libra. This is a really big theme throughout this year. So this is where you're going to find a lot of energy come June when Venus moves in there. So whatever you're organizing now, as you understand the relationship dynamic and maybe how that feeds into your social status or your career or your ambitions and all of that stuff, you might find that then it becomes more graceful. Let's say when Venus moves into the 8th, there's a lot more understanding, maybe a more beneficial impact from relationship, that you're getting more from relationship as Venus moves through the 8th. That's usually where you get benefit from either clients or that can be dividends, or it can be things like royalties earned, or it can be obviously the money that your spouse earns as well. So much of this can be part of that dynamic. As Venus is your ruler, I think it does very much apply to you, not just your spouse. So of course, the Venus can represent the spouse in a male chart traditionally, but nonetheless, it also represents Libra, Sun, Moon, or Rising. So hey ho, it takes two to tango, so maybe it's both of you. So anyway, the point being that this is the big focus for now, and the 10th house is where you feel like now things are slowly going to turn around and feel like the ambition and drive is coming back, the engines are firing up. But as your ruler is going to be stationing retrograde on the 1st of March, that may not come to total fruition until she's finally out of your 7th house and therefore out of her detriment, which is, I think, the 13th of April. Right. Yeah, busy times for you, Libra. There's a lot going on, and especially in the 6th house of obligation. So this might be a bigger part of the story as well. Maybe the Venus in Aries is helping you with that Mars in your 10th. Learn how to ask for help. Could it be that, Libra? All right, so we'll see you in the next video, Libra. Make the most of that. I'll see you soon. And Scorpio, of course, this is your ruler that is now stationing direct. You may not feel that impact immediately, but certainly in the days and weeks to come, from the 24th of February, you're going to feel things starting to shift, and you're going to be more motivated, and especially because Mars is up in the 9th house, where you have a sense of your higher values, your greater sense of purpose, your dharma, the kind of why am I here? The 1st, 5th, and 9th house are considered to be dharma houses, and they're also considered to be fortunate because they bring you support. They bring you some kind of blessing, some kind of support. And here with Mars in the 9th, there may have been some trickiness around your sense of purpose, or maybe a feeling of not being entirely, your heart maybe not entirely in it, as it were. And this is an opportunity for you now to look back on these last couple of months of retrogradation and see what it was that was stuck, how you managed that, how you dealt with emotions and whatever emotions may have come through you. And that clarity will help you also shed some of that as you move forward, because it is your ruler, sun, moon, or rising in Scorpio. And this rulership is very important, as Mars is going to go across the top of your chart. It's kind of like saying you go there. So all of this emotional stuff that you might want to understand about how you're dealing with perhaps also your father or father-like figures, your belief system, what you have faith in, um, that's going to feed into the 10th house. So the ninth contributes to the 10th house. And so this bigger sense of you, your bigger sense of purpose, and this feeling of having a more depth of understanding of all of that will support whatever you do in your career or your marital status. You see, so there's a big choices being made here as well. So equally, as Venus is going back and forth from your 6th house of obligation and duty and the everyday stuff and your habits every day, your health or otherwise your illness, it's also showing you where your preferences lie in terms of your day-to-day life. And later on, as of May, when sorry, is it June even? No, May, 6th of May. No. Yeah, it is June. Venus moves into your 7th only in June. I'm going to go back and tell Taurus. Yeah, so June, Venus is in your 7th house. So all of what you're going through now in February, March, April, May, it's all going to contribute to a better understanding of your relationship dynamic. And that also may correspond to professional relationships, of course, as well as private ones. If there is any health issue, beware of self-indulgence, because Venus is in the 6th and she's ruling the 12th, and there's something that might be showing up in terms of bad habits or ways of just giving yourself stuff that is not really in your best interest. Venus in the 6th is often considered to be a little soft. Luckily, she's ruled by Mars for you. So again, use your higher judgment with Mars there in the 9th house and take care of yourself based on a sense of a higher purpose, keeping your vehicle in good shape, as it were. Right, and then Mercury is trining from your 5th house, creative expression and also innovative ideas, is trining that Mars in your 9th. So there may be something here that you're ready to reach out into and express about yourself. There can also be something quite literally about children. Mercury also represents children, and that there's a lot going on in your house of children, but it also could be projects. So seeing projects like your babies, or just your romance as well, your degree of romance and how that's panning out for you, can also be part of this story. Venus in the 6th could be an office romance, or meeting somebody at work, meeting somebody because you're ill, or meeting somebody because you're the nurse and they're ill, or you're the doctor and they're the patient. All of those are possible as well. Just saying. Right, I think that's it, Scorpio. Yeah, I think that's about it. Yeah, hang in there. It's going to be perhaps a time of having to figure out your what makes you happy in a way that allows you to change your everyday and have a clearer sense of purpose. It could be really a couple of months before that's all very clear, but these eclipses will help you a lot with that. And I'll do separate videos for the eclipses to clarify all of those things as well. All right. Good luck with that, Scorpio. See you in the next video. Sagittarius, this is happening in your 8th house. So you've been doing quite a lot of excavating around your psychology, around your family lineage, around your sense of self, what makes you happy, what makes you feel secure. And certainly there's still a lot to be understood. You're going to have a lot of movement between your 4th house and your 5th house. So that's a big part of that story. And your ruler, Jupiter, is in the 7th house of relationship, and it rules not only your 1st house of self, but also your 4th house of all of this, the family relations stuff, as well as the foundation of your life and your psychological and emotional health and your lineage and all of these things, how you feel about your family, how you relate, and how you speak about them, even especially with that Mercury there in a trine to Mars. Mars is there in the house of family secrets, potentially family trauma, areas of life that may have caused some kind of difficulty for, even if not your generation, then perhaps generations gone behind. And and that are interesting to learn about. And with Mars going through there, there is a courage, let's say, to discover what are these fears, what are these things that are holding me back. Mars also in the eighth house can be a real keen desire to get really deep into your own psychological nature, but also your mystical nature, understanding your connection to spirit. Mars rules your 12th house as well. So when the ruler of the 12th is in the eighth, you really get very serious about your spiritual life. You get serious about the occult. You get serious about, again, psychological stuff, and understanding that from a place of real drive and curiosity. So there may have been some benefit to this retrogradation where you've really been able to understand things by backing away from activity, backing away from too much reaching out and trying to dig deep, and then now it can come forward. And Mars, of course, rules your fifth house of self-expression. So you can, that's where you get your exuberance from Sagittarius. It's Mars on the fifth house, kind of jumping out there saying, here I am. And now you've got Venus there. So there's a lot of friendliness around that. There's a lot of support around that. But now as Venus is also stationing retrograde, you may be questioning some of those preferences. The preferences could be around love, or it could be around, and you know, the usual sort of romantic stuff, but it could also be around children and anything to do with children, and also including your creative projects of any kind. And Venus rules your sixth house of work. So this might be something to do with how you reach out into your work, how you express yourself at work. And she also rules the stage, if you like, the 11th house, which is like the stage that you perform on. So you're pulling something of yourself into that and putting it out there for people to see eventually. That may not be exactly now, but you're certainly preparing something. And then that 11th house is also, of course, your social circle, the friends and so on that support you. And so this Venus retrograde, which is ruled by that Mars in the house of intimacy and secrets and things that are a little more personal, more intimate to you, could also be telling you something about the quality of your relationships and how you reflect on all of those things. Listen to the introduction to hear about the dates, about these different previous transits where you might learn a little bit more about how that dynamic panned out for you in previous times, depending on your age. Right, and I think I'll come back with more details in future videos. So your ruler, of course, Jupiter, is also direct and only just moving beyond the 11th degree. So really, it's only a couple of days after Mars stations direct that Jupiter clears the 11th degree that it's stationed at. So things have not been moving very, very fast. And there's been a lot of a feeling perhaps of sluggishness, because Jupiter also rules your fourth house of your psychological nature and your home and the feeling of stability. It's all going to be moving along better as the spring moves on, or as the early months of 2025 move on for those who are in the south. So thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next video, Sagittarius. Capricorn, this is happening in your house of relationship. As we saw in the introduction, there was at the time of the station a mutual reception. This is now where it's moved out of the orb of opposition, and we can call it a mutual generosity. But anyway, we've got the moon in your house opposing that Mars. And so there's something very personal to you about relationships, about how you are in relationships, the emotional dynamics that might trigger you in relationships. It's really important, Capricorn, to understand the nature of Cancer, because it's your alter ego, if you like. And so when Mars goes through there, which is your exaltation ruler, when Mars is in your sign, it's like, let's just do this. We're going to build this property. We're going to sign that deal. We're going to do that thing. You just soldier on. And Mars and Saturn are the soldiers, and that's very much the sort of firefighter or a police officer, etc., that type of archetype. You're used to that kind of dynamism. And then Mars goes into Cancer, and it's just like, what is going on here? I don't understand a thing. I can't. What do you mean feelings? What feelings? And so basically you're in a situation where you've been grappling with quite a lot of emotional and psychological stuff in your relationships, especially around your family ties and around perhaps your spousal or business type relationships. You may have been a wee bit crabby with Mars there. And so there may be something to apologize about to your spouse or perhaps business partners. You're Capricorn, so that may not be easy for you. Mars rules your fourth house of home. And it also rules your 11th house of your future and your vision for your future. So again, this home aspect of it can be quite literal. It's a physical home. Where do I live? But it can also be where you're recognizing your foundations and your inner home, what goes on behind underneath the surface of who I am, what makes me happy, what makes me feel secure. What do I need to feel grounded and connected emotionally, and even connected to my people, my country, my tribe, um, my lineage of family. So there's a lot of dynamism at this time around relationships that continues right through till the 18th of April. And as I said, Mars rules your 11th house. That's your social groups and friendships and the people you hang out with, or the people you share ideas with, your sort of networks and things. So this again may have you reflecting on or needing to behave in a particular way, or needing to adjust the temperature, as it were, in relationships to those people as well. And again, in accordance with the vision that you might have for your future. And that also, the 11th house where Mars is ruling from the 7th is the house of gains. And with all of this activity in your third house, especially with Mercury from the third house in a trine to Mars at this time, there could be some really gainful, very, very substantial contracts that you're dealing with, especially now that Jupiter is moving direct in the 6th house. And you might be finding a lot more benefit there through contractual relationships that are kind of moving forward now, where it just kind of felt like everything was hanging in limbo for a while. Jupiter is the ruler of your third house, also of these types of agreements and exchanges. So big story there for Capricorn for quite an extended time. Of course, Mars is also the significator for brothers or competitors of all kinds. And that might be also because you've got Mars ruling the 11th, if you have an elder brother, or if you have uncles or family members or friends that feel like competitors. This can also be part of that story. So what was the frustration? Was there any kind of difficulty emotionally, or was there some kind of a battle of wills around any of that stuff as well? And so Venus, of course, is also pretty much where she will be for the next couple of weeks at this 10-degree point in your fourth house. So that smooths a bit of the roughness around the emotional stuff or the psychological stuff, if there is any. But nonetheless, that Mars in the 7th can be a little bit touchy. It can be a little bit kind of uncomfortable, depending, or people might come at you. And so be careful of any kind of unconscious or passive aggressive ways of communicating, especially with Mercury in the 3rd, ruled by Jupiter, with Neptune there as well. There may be things that you're not clear on, or that you're not expressing clearly, and that might feed into frustrations or anger in relationship. Right. But whatever is going on in contractual or other relationships, do reflect on what I said in the introduction. Try and understand where the anger is coming from. Try to take a new perspective on the anger, and most especially own any anger that is there, because it's never really about the thing that we're angry with, is it? All right, Capricorn, good luck with that. I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, Mars is in your 6th house of work, and that certainly will have had you feeling quite pressured around work or obligations, or perhaps around health issues. Certainly, as Mars is ruling your 3rd house of your way of communicating and how you reach out into your local space and neighbors and your family relationships, like extended, like cousins, uncles kind of thing. There may have been some dynamic there where you needed to tend to somebody you needed to be the one to step up and help. The Mars in the 6th house can also represent illness. There can be something that you're grappling with there, especially if you have been feeling like you're working too hard, because that is a kind of a chicken and egg thing, where you might have the Mars there since September making you work really hard, or making you stressed about obstacles and challenges. But the Mars in the 6th house is what you want when you have these obstacles and challenges, because it's willing to push its way through. The thing is that when it's in retrograde, things don't necessarily come clear. They don't really manifest in the way that you would want them to, or as quickly maybe as you want them to. So now that Mars is going direct, things will start to shape up, things will start to manifest and go in the direction that you want and clear the air, as it were. Mars rules your 10th house of career and social status and your reputation, your ambition and aims in life. Um, and social status also meaning marital status and so on. So this can also be where you're working quite hard for those reasons. You're working hard for a plan of ambition and drive that's going to take you to a different place socially, or that you want recognition for example. I'd say you'll get a certain amount of recognition for that when Jupiter moves into your 6th house after Mars clears the 6th house, because Jupiter rules your 11th house of accolades and recognition. So from the 9th of June until the end of June 2026, you've got Jupiter in that 6th house, really very, very happy because it's in its sign of exaltation. So what you're hatching right now with Jupiter, you will gain from in the 6th house after all the brow sweating and the difficulty of the Mars going through that 6th house. Mars, of course, ruling that Venus, which is about to retrograde in your 3rd house. So there may be something that you're negotiating that can also be like a contractual relationship, about your work, about your everyday life, about how you need to navigate some kind of obligation or duty, or even just in terms of how you teach, if you are a teacher, or communicate things. There may be something that you're recognizing you need to put in a bit of work for in order to establish a money-making venture. For example, Venus will go back into your 2nd house of wealth and money and your values. This is also 3rd house Venus communicating your values, talking about them. The 2nd house is your voice, but the 3rd house is what do you say? And so this whole dynamic between Venus in the 2nd, which is exalted, and then the 3rd house Venus is like trying to find maybe a higher meaning to what you say. And then bringing that out when Venus finally goes direct again after all the journey she's going to be taking in the month of March and April. What else? Your ruler, of course, is Saturn, also in that 2nd house. And Saturn is very close to Mercury. So at the time of the actual station, the direct station of Mars is on the 24th. We're now here into the 25th because I'm moving the chart. But nonetheless, Mercury was already getting close to Saturn, your ruler. And that's a really interesting thing because that's picking up on the trine with that Mars. So there's something here about your values, or about your need for money, or about your relationship to money, or your own worth, your own values, your own self-worth or value, that is feeding into your 6th house of what's worth struggling for, what's worth fighting for, what's worth working for. Right. I think I'll leave it at that, Aquarius. We'll come back for another look at Venus in her cycle of the retrograde in the next video. Okay. See you very soon. Pisces, this is happening in the 5th house, and with Mars now moving direct in your 5th house of children and enjoyment and what makes you happy, how you express your happiness, how you express yourself as well. There's quite a lot of motion and dynamism, perhaps around a romantic liaison that felt stuck or that didn't really feel like it was taking off in any way. And by the way, that will work in either direction. Doesn't mean that that's necessarily going to be resolved in the way that you wanted. It just means that there's a resolution there. So it's just worth knowing, and that of course depends on your natal chart. But whatever is going on there, things will start to take shape, and that especially if it's something to do with your creative expression or a money-making venture, because Mars rules your 2nd house of income and how you earn your money and your values, especially as Venus is there. She's your exaltation ruler, so that's really handy. You have maybe this drive now to express something, to reach out into creative expression. This can also be the house of, it represents sports and hobbies. And with Mars there, you may have taken up a new sport or a new hobby or a new way of just expressing yourself. For example, dancing, or something that at least allows you to express your physicality through an emotional way. You know, it's something that brings out a part of you, an intimate part of you, in that Cancerian way, in a dynamic, full-bodied way. So Mercury is in your 1st house now. Lots of things are in your 1st house now, Pisces. We'll come back to that when we talk about the eclipses. But Mercury is there now and trining Mars. And so there's something about you and what you need to communicate and what you're thinking about and what you are realizing about yourself, a new perspective on yourself that you can communicate in a way that is more creative, or that's something that will really bring a part of who you are out. And Venus being in the house of values also, and the house of speech, is also perhaps helping with that, clarifying your speech, becoming more aware of what it is that you'd like to say, how you might want to earn money. And this Mercury can also be part of that journey to the fifth house, which also represents entrepreneurship. Because also your ruler Jupiter is in the fourth house. So this could be, for example, recognizing there's something that you want to do, but with reference to home, where you want to live. Do you want to work from home? Do you want to sell homes? Work with real estate? So this is a more of a personal story for Pisces, but it's going to bring something out that is perhaps financially beneficial for you as well. Mars rules your ninth house of your higher vision, as well as that second house of money, and it's trining that ninth house. So there's also something that you might realize in that area of life in terms of your purpose, and that could be part of what the Mercury in your first house is also helping with that trine to Mars, supporting a new understanding of your role, an understanding of yourself, what you want to express in your life in general through you. Or at the very least in this moment. And then, of course, with all of this stuff in your first house, there's no alternative but to change and grow, Pisces. That's just the way it goes for a Pisces sun, moon, and rising. You are expanding, and you are one of those mutable signs that has an easier time changing. So that's already easy. And with Mars trining your first house, there's a lot of support for that growth and change as well. And all of those trines that are happening now through March and into April, that are, the trines from the Sun and Mercury and Saturn, North Node, and Neptune. That is something that you you going to try into Neptune? We won't get that until Leo, forget that. So the trines up until the North Node are going to help you with this growth and change for Pisces. So a really, really good time now to get that Mars moving forward. The sooner the better. Certainly as the weeks move forward, it will become clearer. You'll have a clearer sense of where you're putting your energy. And again, April probably a little bit more obviously so, as March is going to contain quite a lot of transformation, particularly around your relational dynamics. That's neither good nor bad, it's just change. And your ruler also rules the 10th house from the fourth now. So there's also maybe a need to question this whole notion of career and how it's impacting you, or the notion of your social status in general and how that's impacting you. All right. So good luck with that, Pisces, and I'll see you in the next video. And for everyone watching still here, well done. And I'll see you in the next video. If you are liking what I'm saying, then you can subscribe and like the video. I don't monetize, so I don't mind either way, but it just does help the channel to grow. So thanks for being here to this point. Bye for now.